Hello and welcome to another edition of Fragments of Rock, in which I go through this record collection and the tape collection and my memories with the help of my son Mark. Now, this one, there's this sort of turn up out of the blue. It wasn't a lost tape exactly, but I was delighted to find it when I was going through one of these stamps. Let's put it in perspective. That's the best thing. Deep Purple. Remember that classic album? It had already been album of the week on Extravaganza. And so I was well into their music. Obviously, Deep Purple Rock had come out. I knew all about them. I thought. What I didn't know was that Jon Lord had a classical training when he was a youngster, and therefore there were sort of pulls within the band. And he'd come along especially to plug a new album with Tony Ashton and Yvonne Elliman called the Gemini Suite. It was a classical piece of music. More about that in a moment. Having got Jon Lord in the studio, I knew he had local connections. Obviously, Ian Pace from Deep Purple was from Nottingham. Jon Lord is from Leicester. So I asked him all about that.
Oh, years and years ago, I just left drama school to a great blaze of nothing and starved extremely successfully. In fact, looking back, I don't really know how I sort of managed to keep going. It was ridiculous, you know. At the time, it seemed it was okay, but looking back, it's incredible. Anyway, guy I met in a pub called Bill Ashton said, "Come and join my band, man. Play piano for me." And I thought, well, great, because that was £2 a night, and that was going to keep me going. That was the Bill Ashton combo, which then became a blues group called Red Blood's Bluesicians, which is a name I'm very proud of. I think it's an excellent name. That band amalgamated with a group run by a guy called Artwoods, and the two together became the Artwood Combo. Combo was a very popular name in those days, which became the Artwoods. And in fact, Nottingham was, I should think, our major stamping ground, Nottingham and Derby. We used to do the Corporation Hotel in Derby just about every month. Every one of the boat clubs we've done, and the Dungeon, all around here was, anyway, it was a great area for us. We meant absolutely nothing anywhere else in the country. And we were quite popular around here and in Denmark. Strange group.
You were telling me earlier about another strange band called St. Valentine's Day Massacre. How did all that come about?
It was a record company deal. You know, they'd heard it down the grapevine that Gangsters was going to be the next thing. I mean, the gangster look, you know, not actual real gangsters. And we somehow, the group was about to break up, and this record company sort of conned us into changing our name to the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, putting on double-breasted pinstripe suits and fedora hats and carrying sort of wooden machine guns around with it. It was all terribly embarrassing. And we made one record at the St. Valentine's Day Massacre of an old song called Buddy, Can You Spare a Dime? And then we sort of gracefully slipped into oblivion. After that, I joined the Flowerpot Men. I mean, the Flowerpot Men's backing group, which was actually a lot of fun, because the Flowerpot Men, I know a lot of people sort of laughed at them. You know, that sort of terrible manufactured plastic flower child image, you know, especially with their lovely little tubby bass player. It didn't look like a flower child, he looked like a flower bag. And bless him, he'll probably sue me there. But they were actually very good on stage. Their vocal harmonies were really, really excellent. The four of them, it was Tony Burrows, who sort of did all that sessioning just recently, Neil Landon, who I think was with Fat Mattress, and two guys who are now with White Plains. Then I met Chris Curtis, ex-Searcher. Is this getting boring?
No, I'm interested.
Chris Curtis wanted to start a group. The only reason I sort of agreed was because he'd got Ritchie Blackmore, and I'd never played with Ritchie, but I'd heard so much about him. But Ritchie and I stuck together and met our present managers.
He's mentioned the Boat Club and the Dungeon, the key themes we've heard before on Fragments of Rock. But he's also mentioned a group called the Artwoods.
Yeah, that was a band he was in. He was in quite a few bands previously, as he says in the piece. But the Artwoods, I thought, were a national band, nationally famous, but apparently not. They were mainly famous in the East Midlands. And he mentioned the boat club and the various union rowing clubs. Oh, here we are, there's a union rowing club. And you'll see down here on their list, the Artwoods. That's the union. And if you go into the boat club diary, which is a fabulous diary, which Keith Atkinson put together, superb. If you go into that, you find May the 8th, Sunday, May the 8th, 1966, the Artwoods. So there they are. The saddest thing about that part of the interview was somewhere along the line, I either didn't record this or he told me another time, but he was telling me about the Artwoods and how everything was very crude in those days, sound-wise and electrically, and they had no earthing in some club they were in. And there was a short circuit. And he said, suddenly, I was playing the organ and a jolt went through my body. He said, I don't remember anything until I woke up with amongst the audience. And then he said, they all thought it was wonderful. They were all clapping and cheering. He said, but what had happened was the shock of the electric going through my body had made me somersault into the audience. And they thought it was part of the act. And I haven't got that on tape. I'm really cross about that. There's a similar story about Jimi Hendrix, isn't it? When his guitar caught fire and everybody thought it was part of the act, and he was terrified on stage because it wasn't meant to happen. But that's another apocryphal story. Now, Deep Purple, but apparently there was a little bit of a pull in the band. And the pull occurred because Jon Lord wanted to put more classical music into it. He had a jazz background. His dad was a saxophonist. He had this classical training, and he felt that he should be doing more classical music. This caused a bit of, not exactly a schism, but it caused tension in the band. I mean, you remarked upon it. There is a classical influence on some of the earlier albums, isn't there? You know, Speaking, was it?
Just brilliant. But what were they thinking about putting? You know, I mean, it's inspired, but that bit it's orchestral at the beginning, isn't it, with the organ?
Go back to the time. Keith Emerson in Nice had already been playing classical music on an electric organ or whatever organ he was using. Rick Wakeman was along. And so to hear that at the beginning of a rock album, to me, was, it's par for the course. But I didn't realize that actually a lot of the band didn't want this to happen. They didn't want it to be too classical. And there was a slight, I mean, obviously they were satisfied with Speaking, and who wouldn't be? There was a slight pull in the band. And John was allowed to go off and do some classical work, which the BBC commissioned.
Interesting.
He'd already had a concerto which had been successful. BBC were impressed and said, could you write a new suite? He called it the Gemini Suite. And that was put on, in London. It was big with big orchestra, London Philharmonic Orchestra, I think it is. There's Yvonne Elliman on vocals, Tony Ashton on vocals. This is where Tony Ashton comes in, and he's the man you hear laughing in the background, by the way, on the original tape. He's come along to talk about this album.
And called the Gemini Suite. It gives a reason why it's called the Gemini Suite, doesn't it? About it being schizophrenic, doesn't he? And what was understood then as schizophrenia, not now.
Yeah. We'll listen to that, but just before I set the scene, the cover is definitely not Deep Purple. It's sort of like if I remember rightly, it's like a serpent, and then it goes into the middle of the album, sort of astrologically. And I couldn't cope with it, so I commented on it.
That's what I thought, but I didn't design the inside. I suppose it was a gimmick that somebody thought would be groovy to put on. No, the only sort of connection with astrology is, and the only reason it's called the Gemini Suite is because the characteristic of a Gemini is a vague schizophrenia, and the character of the music is vaguely schizophrenic. I mean, it darts between orchestra and group and so on. It's a very tenuous link. I mean, the BBC said, well, you've got to call it something. You can't just call it a suite, which I wanted to do. I mean, I thought that was a good title, but they said, oh no, you've got to call it something.
Listening to the LP, the one track that stands out, really stands out. I like the Albert Lee very much. The one that really stands out is the one where you're on organ.
Oh, you like
You seem really at home there.
Yeah, there's a lot of freedom for the organ in it. It's not constricted like the other movements could tend to constrict the soloist a little bit, I know that, for instance, Little Ian on the drum movement found it very difficult to let himself go, so he kind of relaxed back into a very technical way of playing, which actually for me comes off, but I mean, I think Little Ian would have preferred to be much looser on it.
Having listened to that though, I still find it really surprising that Tony Ashton was working with Jon Lord.
Well, I did, you see, because to me, Ashton, Gardner and Dyke, which was the band he was in, was a fun band, Resurrection Shuffle. Great disco number. I used to use it when I was doing discos all the time, because it was a great one, get people on the floor. So I sort of said to him, you're a bit of a sort of happy band, not nothing deep, really. And I wouldn't say took exception to it, but he did come back at me.
Well, we do play God time music in a sense, but there's a lot more to it than the Resurrection Shuffle. And we've got some sort of brilliant musicians with us now. There's 7 of us now. We've got John Mumford on trombone, Dave Caswell, Lyle Jenkins, trumpet and tenor respectively. And we're all seasoned musicians anyway. We've all been around and we're all playing very competent stuff without trying to sound immodest. For instance, we did Ronnie Scott's club for 2 weeks with Herbie Mann, which shocked a lot of people, which is an attempt to break down the stigma that seems to be attached to Ashton, Gardner, Dyke and company. And in fact, we did tremendously well at Ronnie Scott's, and we're going back there with Cannonball Adderley, and Scott's knocked out with us, and it's great, but going across to universities, colleges, and heavy, for want of a better word, it's hard until we get out there and prove it.
It's funny how people are kind of pigeonholed, isn't it, really?
Yeah, you get known for, same for actors, isn't it? You play a part in a comedy and people think, oh, we can actually do serious when it starts to do serious. It's just, you get this, it's sad and it's wrong, but we all do it. Well, I certainly do it. And so it put me in my place. To end the interview, I said, what's next in the pipeline? And apparently they had a single coming out. And this is an absolutely brilliant story about this single. It's linked with a film.
We've got a new single out, which is from a film.
Yeah.
This ties up with John. We've both got together doing a film soundtrack. Now, this I find quite strange. Now, why is it Jon Lord, Tony Ashton doing a film soundtrack together? How did all this come about?
Well, John asked me simply to if I'd come along and help him to do a film soundtrack, and the single resulted from it, and since then we've enjoyed working together, because John's got an incredible thing, and I've got an incredible thing as well. And we worked here. We're doing an album together now. We just started an album together of things that we want to do that we can't do with our respective bands, and the film was a good start, to a good long-lasting relationship, musical relationship.
The film isn't out here yet, so perhaps you can tell us something about it, because we're all in the dark.
Well, I wouldn't worry too much about the movie. John will tell you, he's good at it, I find it hard to say that the film is really a bit bad, but it is.
Perhaps I can ask John about the film, because Tony doesn't know anything about it, you see.
Well, he knows very little about anything, does our Tony? Well, the film is a dreadful piece of celluloid. It's really bad. The star, and I use the word very loosely, is an American football player called Joe Namath, who's the Georgie Best of America. Not quite so good looking, a bit more rugged, but basically a big star. Not just a football player. He gets into other things. He does advertise. He advertises boots and cologne and all sorts of things. One of those. And he wanted to make a cowboy film. And when Joe Namath wants to make a cowboy film, he makes a hey, get Joe a cowboy film. So everyone's rushing around getting him a film, and so they get him a film. The producer, I think, wanted some music that would save his stupid little film. So he came to me because he'd heard the concerto thing, and he thought it would be nice to have a group and orchestra mix for a western. And as it happened, he was right. Had the film been good, I think the whole concept and the whole end result could have been very, very excellent. For instance, there's a scene where he's obviously being chased by a posse, and all that. And instead of doing a sort of William Tell Overture type chase music, we did a hairy sort of rock and roll number,